All right. Good evening, everyone. How y'all doing tonight?
Good evening.
How y'all doing tonight?
All right.
All right. My name is Michaela, and I have the pleasure of welcoming you to the Space and Copa Video Books and Cafe. This is our 25th year anniversary. We're still claiming this year, 25 years now, so it's special that you guys get to attend this event with the legend, Dr. Halifu Osumare. Please clap. She's doing a presentation and talk on her latest release, Dancing the Afrofuture. Now, you might be wondering, why am I saying she is a legend? Dr. Halifu Osumare is Professor Emerita in the Department of African American and African Studies at University of California, Davis, and was the Director of African American Studies from 2011 to 2014. She has been a dancer, choreographer, arts administrator, and scholar of Black popular culture for over 40 years. Okay, with a PhD in American Studies from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and a master's in dance ethnology from SF State University. She is also a protege of the late renowned dancer and anthropologist Katherine Dunham, and a certified instructor of Dunham dance technique, amongst many other things. So I'm not going to hold up too much time because she has a lovely presentation that's going to be very informative and enlightening. And we're just very happy and blessed and honored to have you here.
Thank you, Michaela. Thank you so much. And I heard there's only 3 more copies of Dancing the Afrofuture left. Woo! They've been selling all week. So thank you. And I so appreciate you inviting me to Sankofa. It's really renowned. Every time I told people I was coming to Washington, D.C. and I was going to be at Sankofa Books and Video, they were like, oh, yeah, I know exactly where that is. Well, that's a great venue. So I'm so happy to be here. And I must confess that I'm not at my fullest. I kind of contracted some little bug yesterday that's definitely going around. And I had to put on my healing mode to get myself here tonight. I apologize if I have to cough a little bit and drink some water, but I'm here. As you can see, my presentation will encompass the book is Dunham and the Afrofuture in Dance. She mentioned that I am a protege of Katherine Dunham. And how many people have heard of Katherine Dunham here? All right. Well, so I'm preaching to the choir tonight. Good. We became very close, and her legacy and the philosophy that she left us, because she passed in 2006, is definitely still alive and moving forward, and is one of the lenses that I use throughout the book to talk about dance and the Afrofuture. As you can see from this slide, I have a very close and personal connection to Ms. Dunham, and I actually follow the model that she set, because she really created this template, if you will, of the artist scholar. She was a dancer choreographer, but also an anthropologist, researcher, and writer. And she showed us that being a dancer did not exclude you being a thinker and a writer, and get your ideas about dance and choreography and culture in general published. And so she gave me that sense of that model, and I think I have followed that, because the book is really about my transition from being solely a dancer, choreographer, and running my own dance school, to becoming a writer, researcher, academic, and scholar. And if you can see from that third bullet point down here, I actually became very close to her even after beginning to study directly with Ms. Dunham in the mid-'80s in East St. Louis, where she used to teach an annual seminar after disbanding the world-famous Katherine Dunham Dance Company. in the mid '60s. And during that time that I was annually going to East St. Louis, I created two major residencies for her. One was at Stanford University, where I was a lecturer at the time in May of 1989 for a full month to teach anthropology classes, dance classes, interface with the neighboring Black community, and major public lectures. And then in '94, bringing her to Hawaii, where I was living at the time, to do two islands, both the Big Island and Oahu, where Honolulu is. So, given all of that, we became very close. And I not only consider her my main dance mentor, but also I considered her my spiritual mother. This is the book. It's in 9 chapters, and it kind of follows, it is a memoir, so it follows my life career and that transition into being a scholar. And if when you read it, you'll see that I began to talk about my various theories and philosophy about dance, but also I became a hip hop scholar. And in fact, that's what I got my my PhD in American studies, but my dissertation was on the globalization of hip hop. One of the first scholars to begin to talk about how it was affecting youth outside the United States. And the first chapter of the introduction is called From Dancing on the Stage to Dancing on the Page. And I began to see that there were certain principles that I had learned as a dancer and a choreographer that I could also use in writing. And hence the metaphor that I use for the introduction. This is a sequel memoir. I don't know how many of you have read my first one, which was Dancing in Blackness. Okay, Kelly, I see your hand lit up. Yeah, Dancing in Blackness, which really focused on my career as a young dancer, and then traveling to Europe and dancing in New York and dancing in West Africa, and particularly Ghana. And the chapter kind of follows that, but it also looks again at Miss Dunham as the model that I used for my my career. And as you see in that photograph there, that was when she came to Stanford and did all of those various activities during that 1-month residency. Just a quick overview of her life. Born in 1909, made her transition in 2004. She lived a long life, 97 years, and these are the 4 major areas that I kind of divide up her journey. From 1928 to 1937 was her education and training. This is when she was beginning, one of the first Black students in the anthropology department at the University of Chicago, because she was born around Chicago, and that's where she did most of her beginning work. At the same time, she was also studying with ballet teachers, the beginnings of what we call modern dance, and going to see some of the early jazz dance of vaudeville of the 1920s and 30s. So she was beginning to marry those two, how anthropology and dance could work together. And in fact, her anthropology teachers, some of the ones who really was developing that field in the university system, was glad that she was in their department, because she, in fact, could bring some kind of coherence to what they were seeing among the various peoples that they were studying. Native Americans, Polynesians, etc. Everybody was dancing, doing rituals and festivals, and they had no way of really figuring out how to talk about it. And so they figured if a dancer came into the field of anthropology, she would be able to give some theoretical perspective about how to talk about dance in relationship to society and culture. From 1938 to 65 is when she developed the famous Catherine Dunham Dance Company. And when I say famous, I do mean famous. She took sometimes up to 50 people, musicians, dancers, singers, around the world, Europe, South America, Asia. And she performed actually more outside the United States than inside the United States because the world embraced her, whereas in the United States she was always subject to segregation. In 65, she disbanded the company, and that's when she moved to East St. Louis, and that's where I began studying with her in her annual dance seminar. And I call this her community activism period because she was really testing out a theory of hers called socialization through the arts. Can the arts, music and dance, really uplift the community and get those people to feel more empowered to take their destiny in their own hands, in terms of lifting up their economic status and lifting up their community. And her Performing Arts Training Center that she developed during that period in East St. Louis was definitely something that had changed, and it still today had changed East St. Louis. And in the 90s and up till her passing, she moved to New York, and I call that her world humanitarian high priestess phase. She was an initiated Vodun priest, and she was definitely a very high spiritual person. This slide just kind of summarizes what I think is her contributions. I said Dunham was the first to bring the beauty of African diaspora dance culture to the world stage. And that last bullet point, I say Dunham performed how and why Black Lives Matter worldwide. Because as she traveled, she picked up dancers from auditions all over the world into her company. And so I oftentimes call her the original Black Lives Matter diva. I wanted to show you a piece of Catherine Dunham that I talk about and analyze how she was really what I call our first Afrofuturist dancer choreographer. In 1943, she appeared in the all-black musical Stormy Weather. This is right in the middle of World War II. How many people have seen that movie? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, okay. So you're familiar with it. When Miss Dunham performed, her company performed in the actual song Stormy Weather, the break, where Lena Horne is in a club singing the song, and she goes up to a window and looks out, and there's an actual storm appearing, and then the Dunham Company is out on the street performing to that song. I want you to pay special attention to the beginning of the whole scene, and then the transition that happens very quickly out of that street scene. Thank you. dancers went on to become very famous in their own right. Tally Beatty, he was the first male dancer to come out. So in this sequence, she calls it her lyrical sequence that we learn at the bar. Just like in ballet, there's a Dunham bar. And it's her modern interpretation using Caribbean isolation movements along with modern ballet. Okay. Can I have that light back on? Thank you, because I need to read now. I'm going to read my first Passion book. Okay, just a little behind the scenes before I read this paragraph from the introduction. If you notice in the beginning, there's street people out on the street underneath a railroad overhang to get out from the storm. And then when she looks up at the clouds and lightning strikes, then out of that another vision comes, and then you see what we call the dream sequence. Well, let's just say the director wanted the whole scene, her whole dance, to take place out on the streets. Okay. Katherine Dunham's style offers an Afrofuturist model through dance, while negotiating the demands of institutional racism and stereotyping. She researched the past for self-empowered vision of Blackness, and in the process performed on some of the world's largest stages. A brilliant, groundbreaking dance sequence in the 1943 all-black Hollywood film, Stormy Weather, was a tour de force of a futuristic modern vision of Blackness in the midst of lingering World War II blackface minstrelsy, stereotypic vaudevillian tap, exhibitionist acrobatic routines, and popular Lindy Hop dancers. What makes Katherine Dunham's Stormy Weather choreographic dance break such a modernist contrast is her reversal of the director Andrew L. Stone's image of black street people, read pimps and prostitutes, engaged in a social partnering dancing under overhead train tracks to escape the deluge of the storm. At a key moment in the outdoor scene, Dunham, as the madam of the streets, peers up at the ominous cinematic storm clouds just as lightning strikes across the sky and the entire scene changes. Her choreography develops into a dream sequence with the same dancers now appearing in flowing modernist costumes by her husband John Pratt, transformed into a new vision of Black humanity. So I'm saying she's one of our first Afrofuturist dance choreographers is because, again, the director wanted the whole scene to be this kind of slinky jazz number on the street with them playing street people, pimps and prostitutes, with her as the madam. And she said, okay, we will start there, but then I have another idea. Why don't we take it into a kind of dreamy sequence, and then we'll return back to the street. That film clip didn't show you returning back to that, but they did. They went back to the street. So I'm saying she gave the director what he wanted, but she got also what she wanted to get this other vision. And this is our first time seeing a kind of futuristic vision of us self-defining and self-empowering rather than only playing these stereotypes that they wanted us to play. So, now that we're here in the 21st century and we hear about Afrofuturism all the time, I'm looking forward to seeing the National African American Museum of History and Culture and seeing their Afrofuturism exhibit tomorrow. It's all around us and we hear this word, but what does it really mean? I'm saying in that second bullet point, Black folks are now imagining ourselves in a future not tied to a narrative of oppression, as Dunham had to negotiate in the 1940s segregation era. And this reverts back to something that should be very familiar to everyone here, the Sankofa bird, and that I use in my book as the Sankofa process. The bird is with the backward turned head, looking back to the past to understand one's present. In that second bullet point, I say, one cannot know where one is going if one does not know where one has been. And so our looking back to our African heritage, looking to the wisdom of the mother continent has been all a part of our Sankofa process. However, look at what the bird is doing. The bird is about to consume the egg. The egg is the future. And so within the Sankofa bird symbol of the Ashanti of Ghana is past, present, and future. And so I'm using that as a way of looking at how we move forward into an empowered and self-defined new image of ourselves. And so my definition of Afrofuturism is the empowering soul of people of African descent through a liberated imagination to carve a new path with the arts and technology. The empowering soul of people of African descent through a liberated imagination to carve a new path with the arts and technology. And so this slide tells us that we've already had Afrofuturism all a part of our culture, but we didn't have the word to call it. Right? What about Uhuru in Star Trek? You know, that was in the 1960s. And she had wanted to leave that franchise, the Star Trek franchise, after one season. But it was our Dr. Martin Luther King who convinced her to stay. And what did he say? He says, it's important that you be in the Star Trek series because we need to see ourselves in the future. And what about Sun Ra? Sun Ra he's now an ancestor, but his solar orchestra is still with us. And they're right there in New York, and they do play, and they do also travel nationally to continue his music, where he would always say, space is the place. Space is the place. And this is a myth, y'all. We can create our own myth. Yeah. Those were the kinds of images that he was telling us all the way from the 70s and 80s. And what about even George Clinton and the Funkadelics? They didn't come out from the wings onto the stage to play their funk music. They descended from the mothership coming down. And I heard that, isn't that a representation of the mothership at the museum? Yeah. So again, these ideas of Afrofuturism and us, you know, seeing that we're not subsumed in this definition by others, but in fact creating our own definition of who we are and where we're going in the future has always been around us. But we have to claim it now. We have to really claim it and use it. And what about Janelle Monáe's, her use of android and acronoid imagery in her videos? You know, it continues even until today. So In this slide, I show how Afrofuturism has been so much a part of many different genres. Of course, Octavia E. Butler, I'm sure you must have a few of her books here. Yeah? She is one of our premier science fiction writers with Parable of the Sower, Parable of the Talent, as New York Times bestsellers. I've read many of her novels, and she was the one who literally wrote Black people into the future, into the idea that we could be magical, we could be whoever we wanted to be. Just check her out. Sunrise, I mentioned before, in jazz music. Kerry James Marshall in painting. Christopher Priest in comic book illustrations. Both he was one of the first Blacks to be hired by DC Comics as well as Marvel Comics. And of course, Ryan Coogler's Black Panther and Wakanda Forever. Those movies etched in the whole world a sense of Africa, African culture, and high technology. Bringing those two ideas together in a filmic representation that, even though you might have found different problems with the movies, it still gave you that sense of Africa and high technology that can be the future of our motherland. And I talk a lot about that particular movie and how he deals with that subject matter. He's from Oakland.
Yeah.
I'm from Oakland.
Yeah.
Right? And if you notice in Black Panther, T'Challa's cousin is in Oakland, right? Who has been left out of the lineage. And so in that way, he kind of creates a Sankofa process in the movie to let us know, yes, we're moving forward with this new technology, but we have to remember those who've been left behind, those who have to be brought forward into that future. So even within Black Panther, as he's representing that African culture and high technology, he's looking back to who we need to bring along. This is a quote that I really love, and it's by Dr. Alondra Nelson, a Deputy Director for Science and Society in the current Biden administration. She is one of our major Afrofuturist thinkers. And she says, Black people have lived the alienation that science fiction writers imagine. Blacks as the alienated citizen are the original aliens. And I think we ought to claim that and see what we can do with our alien status. Now, as you can tell from the title, Dancing the Afrofuture. I'm obviously very concerned with how dance also represents this concept of a self-defined, self-empowered future. And these are 4 choreographers that I write about in the book. Adisa Bella Grimes from Los Angeles, Andre Zachary from Brooklyn, Camille A. Brown, who, by the way, appeared with me in Brooklyn when I just left New York in a book reading there, and Raisa Simpson from San Francisco. So I have just some short clips I'd like to show you from these 4 young choreographers. Bella Grimes is in Los Angeles. He uses actually Octavia Butler's concept of Earthseed and has a movement system that he calls Earthseed movement. He uses hip hop popping as one of his sources of his choreography. And this is a site-specific piece on the beach as a solo piece of choreography by him dancing his own work.
God of my heart, your love, create your love, wisdom, may all be blessed and may all be at God of my spirit, supreme inspiration. God of my heart, I sing praise your great love. Creator and love, wisdom, may all be blessed and may all be at home. God of my soul, inspiration. God of the stars, I take refuge in your great love. Creator and God, wisdom. May all be blessed and may all find your way to
Yeah. I see dance not just as a series of steps, but as embodied knowledge. I see dance as embodied knowledge. There's a lot of knowledge in that sequence that he was communicating. Andre Zachary uh, from Renegade Dance Group in Brooklyn. He is of Haitian descent with uh, and also explores Yoruba spirituality. And this particular piece is him looking at the Maroon societies that were created in the Caribbean when slaves ran away and started their own communities that were became a part of their history, such as in Jamaica. I'm going to start this, but I'm gonna. Okay, good.
Artistic director and choreographer Andre and Zachary called upon his familial lineage in the southern United States.
Okay. That was the beginning of that. Okay, now Camille A. Brown and dancers. Um, have any of you heard of her as a choreographer? Yes, okay, yeah. She is really getting a lot of recognition in New York right now. Her Camille A. Brown and Dancers, they tour internationally, and she is about to be the choreographer for Hell's Kitchen on Broadway. And she was the director choreographer for the uh, uh, reprise of For Colored Girls Who Consider Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough on Broadway in 2022 when it reopened after COVID. At any rate, she celebrates the rituals and gestural vocabulary and traditions that remain ingrained within the lineage of the African diaspora and reclaims African American narrative by showcasing their authenticity. You will see in her choreography a real Sankofa process of looking back to past dance styles, especially partnering dance styles in Black culture, but re-envisioned in a new kind of way. And this is a site-specific piece in one of my favorite places, the library. That's Camille. Each choreographer follows their own muse, their own way of looking at revisiting the past, but moving us forward into an Afrofuture through dance. And Raisa Simpson is definitely one of those. She's in San Francisco, and she's gonna actually, her company is gonna appear with me on March 19th in San Francisco for one of my last readings on this tour. And she says that she uses Black and BIPOC dancing bodies in her Push Dance Company to explore the ancient future paradigm of Afrofuturism. And she likes to explore the possibilities of dance of the future as now. this is just a very, very short clip from her website, um, on her company, and then I'm going to show you a short clip from her actual piece that she's going to perform with me. If you see that quote here, she also, like Catherine Dunham, writes and publishes about her vision of dance as from an Afrofuturist perspective.
Life was not about the same, like how do you control the situation when you walk? The other person is the actor. You're in the past, and how do you control the interaction when you're in the fixed position in the past? I like to say black people do this thing I call glamour. We glamour. It's kind of like you're chained against the wall. The person that's acting on your body.
Now this piece is she calls techno culture, and she actually uses drones with the dancers. She collaborated with a drone technologist to program the drones and to bring them into the rehearsal process, and it's quite interesting. Check it out. Can this light be put out now? Just so the screen is a little darker. Yeah, thank you. Our Afrofuturist choreographers are exploring this whole theme in various ways. And my conclusion is that Afrofuturism is all around us in the 21st century. It's important for Black people to creatively design our own future, beyond the horror of the past and the uncertainty of the present. And artists of all genres, including dance, are creatively speculating on an Afrofuture. And in that speculation, in the process, are creating it. I wanted to leave you with one more passage from the book. And it is the last very last paragraph. So this is my last words. As life, and it also puts me back in this whole process, because it is a memoir. Life has spanned the analog to the, my life has spanned the analog to the digital. I have lived through the Polaroid instant picture to the mobile phone selfie. And each era, I looked myself straight in the eyes and saw my reflection. I have made the world my stage, as Shakespeare wrote in As You Like It. And it is so true. Today, performance has made a discipline of the performance of life in all its dimensions, from the political to the personal. And in our digital age, the personal has become synonymous with the political. The proscenium stage cannot contain all that needs to be said and danced. Taking the dance to the people where it first started, as Alvin Ailey has told us, is important, particularly in these times of the digital global connection, yet utter personal alienation. I urge all of us to take to the streets and dance the carnival of life with Afrofuture intentions, where class, race, ethnicity, gender, and sexuality disintegrates into the bacchanal of our collective human identities. And as Amanda Gorman, the youngest national poet laureate, has said, and so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside.
All right.
Thank you. And that's the book. And that's a wrap.
Do we have any questions or comments? The sister back here, she raised her hand first. Okay. I got you.
Hi, first I just want to say thank you for such a good presentation.
Thank you.
I grew up in the dance studio myself, so I took a lot of time to find my own personal freedom and just learning a lot of life lessons through the studio myself. Right now I go to Rutgers. I'm getting my master's in applied psychology because I'm trying to open a school of the arts for kids from underserved populations and stuff. So you gave me a lot of food for thought today with your presentation. I just want to ask though, how do you see Afrofuturism like evolving over time in terms of like artistically and culturally incorporating that into our education systems, especially for the Black children?
Mm-hmm. Well, as you can see from the artists that I represented in my presentation, Afrofuturism takes on different bents depending on the artist and their inclinations. However, there are some kind of through lines. One is various uses of technology. Another is the fact that we must creatively use our imagination with that sense of self-empowerment and self-definition. Those are terms that I keep coming back to in the book. As opposed to following others' definition of us. We live in a system of white supremacy, as we know. Yeah. So we have to constantly interrogate and redefine who we are and where we're going. But I do think that artists who are thinking about that Sankofa process, that they are looking at not only developing their own repertoire in terms of Afrofuturism, but how that's going to relate to community. And say, for instance, Camille, she has something called Social Dance for Social Change. And she takes it into the schools and she gets work for her artists, her dancers in her company to actually go into the schools and to work with the kids. So a lot of Afrofuturists are thinking about how to bring the community along with what they're doing in terms of the development of their art. And and I find more Afrofuturists who are thinking like that than who are only thinking about themselves and their particular art form. They're looking at community too.
Hi, I had more of a comment, but she touched on part of my question too, which related to education. But I wanted to thank you, first of all, just for your existence. And I loved reading the first book because it captured so well that cultural milieu of the Bay Area that I grew up in. And so, the dance was such a part of our education. And she was talking about bringing dance to young people. We had dance everywhere. I remember Family Natoto teaching dance classes. Your dance studio, Casadero Music and Arts. I went there as well, so it was sort of a given. And then when I left the Bay Area, I realized it wasn't like that everywhere, right? Yeah. But that early African dance education has so much to do with my own evolution in the arts and doing different things, oral history, writing, and I do wish that our children throughout the nation had that experience. I mean, they used to do square dancing, right? You probably remember that. I don't know if anybody else remembers that. They used to make us do square dancing, right? As a part of our American history curriculum. Well, African dance should be a part of that.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they do any dance anymore, but if they're going to bring dance into the curriculum, which they should, it should be African dance, indigenous dance, and sure, a little square dancing too, but all of that is a part of the American history thing. Now, watching Camille Brown reminded me of Pro Primus. So that's what I wanted to ask you, because you haven't heard anything about Pro Primus. I did have a chance to meet her in the 80s and take some dance from her. What do you think about her role in history?
Well, Pro Primus was like Miss Dunham. She was an anthropologist as well as a dancer choreographer. So she had that marriage between those two disciplines. And her, where Miss Dunham did her research in the Caribbean, Pro Primus did hers in Africa, in Nigeria, in Liberia, in various countries where she began to interact with the artists, dancers, and drummers there, and she brought that information back to the United States. So she was equally influential. She's a little younger than Miss Dunham, and she did have a company, but she didn't really develop it to the point where she did international touring like Miss Dunham, and that's why Miss Dunham, I think, has a larger reputation because she did tour internationally. But Miss Primus was equally as influential and gave us many theories about how dance and culture work together, particularly for African peoples. So I definitely, take my hat off to her and lift her up as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, shake it on.
Yeah. First, I'm so just very impressed with your presentation and the work that you put into your new book. I guess I'm asking, how do you see the role of community and the culture that is coming out of our communities now in terms of the dances they do and that intersecting with this whole idea of Afrofuturism and our community seeing themselves not just in the moment and just in going forward. How is there an intersection you see for that?
So when you say the dances that are coming out of our community, you mean like the social dances?
Yeah, the social
or what
dances.
we see in music videos, or
More, I guess a little bit, but more talking about the social dances, things that are coming organically from our communities and not necessarily the popular media stuff.
Well, I see dance as one of our most tenacious cultural traits that has never been able to be taken away from us. They did take away the drums, but they couldn't take away their bodies. They needed our bodies to build this economy. All right, so our bodies carry the rhythm. Our bodies carry the blood memory, if you will. And so I think that we've always remembered who we are through our bodies and our movement. It's so much more important to Black people that they dance well, for example. You know, when I was teaching at UC Davis, and I taught a course called the History of Black Dance, and I had my students read an article about fraternity stepping and sorority stepping, and I asked the students, the white students, I said, how many of you have to learn how to dance in order to pledge? Not one person held up their hands, you know. And the Black students, I said, how many of you are in a fraternity or sorority? And most of them, I said, did you have to learn how to dance? They said, yeah, and it better be good too. Yeah. So the dance is so important to us, and I do think that it's something that is carried through each generation. But we don't always know what it's about and what it's hooked up to. That through line that is so important to understand. And so that's why in educating our community about their dances and why they move the way they move is so important. And again, that goes back to what the first sister asked me about taking the dance back into the schools, taking the dance into the community in terms of real dance education. And that's what needs to happen, because it's gonna happen, because it's a part of our survival. We wouldn't have survived if we didn't remember through our bodies.
That's right.
So I think that it's gonna take more people who have that knowledge to go into the community centers as well as the schools, to get them to understand why they dance the way they do and what that's all about. But it's happening, and it's gonna continue to happen. It's just a part of who we are. Does that kind of answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, if I can squeeze two in.
Sure.
This goes back to the previous memoir. So you mentioned the significance of Black studies and dance groups on campuses. Can you say more about the relationship between Black studies and being a space where people who are interested in and wanted to practice dance could come? And then you also mentioned, briefly, the work of your former Stanford colleague, Sylvia Winter, who also started off as a dancer.
You
working-
know that. Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
I had the pleasure of writing about her.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
She worked with Bosco Holder. And,
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
fact,
she
you
did
mentioned,
a play called Masquerade, I think.
Right.
That had a lot of dance and the Caribbean
Right.
Culture of masking and carnival in it.
but she mentioned that it was through watching Holder and Dunham that she actually not first, but helped develop her decolonial
Yes.
understanding of the world.
Yeah.
So I just want to know more about your interactions with Sylvia while you were at Stanford.
Okay. Well, first of all, to go back to your first question about Black studies and how dance fits into all of that. First of all, Black studies was something that evolved from the late 60s, where we fought really hard to get into first the higher education and then into, public schools. And as you see, they're trying to reverse that right now very heavily. Because it's powerful. So Black studies and ethnic studies in general was put together as a bridge between academia and community. So in the beginning, at least, Black studies, you had to have some kind of community activism component as a part of the discipline, and you were actively engaged in community work at the same time as you were teaching your discipline within the academy. I don't know how much that is still around, but that was the original meaning of Black studies and ethnic studies. You know, that you know, bridging that gap that exists within academia. And I was at Stanford, not as a tenured professor, but as a lecturer for over a decade. And that's when I met Sylvia Winter. And if there's any university that's totally alienated from the community, Stanford is one of them. But I was a part of the Committee on Black Performing Arts as well as the dance division. And so we tried to do whatever we could to kind of rectify that. Sylvia Winters, who is a brilliant scholar of Jamaican descent, and she's one of the most interdisciplinary scholars that I've ever met. She knows so much about science, the humanities, literature, and she wove all those things together as a part of what she wrote and how she taught. When I was working with her, she asked me to choreograph her play. It's called Masquerade, and it's all about the origins of Caribbean masking and carnival, and it was just brilliant. I always tried to find a way to put dance within the mix of academia, because it was, obviously it was my discipline, but people were ignoring it as a real way of teaching. They were ignoring dance as a way of teaching. They were looking at, history and the social sciences, etc. And I'm saying, okay, but what about dance? And not just dance, again, learning some steps, but dance as embodied knowledge. And so I was doing that at Stanford as much as I could, and Sylvia saw that, and that's why she asked me to bring my knowledge base. And because I didn't know a lot about Caribbean masquerade at that time, I had to do a lot of research, and she kind of mentored me in that process. And I even went to Jamaica in the 80s, and she was there for a period of time, and we met in her, in her country. Yeah. So she's brilliant, and she recognized how much dance had to be a part of that play, and brought me into it. When I was at San Francisco State, one of the beginnings of Black history and Black studies in academia, I fought hard to get the so-called revolutionary brothers and sisters to realize that dance had to be a component of Black studies, as well as all the other disciplines that academia had already accepted as a part of its milieu.
Thank you.
I don't have a question, but I just have a comment.
Sure.
I really appreciated the whole presentation and how you were able to conceptualize Afrofuturism. As a person who's had an issue with accepting that term, like for the past 10 years, I liked how you incorporated older terms that already existed that we just didn't have access to at the time. So it helps me kind of, bridge the gap, I guess, that I had in my consciousness.
Yeah, a lot of times when we hear new ideas, so-called new ideas and new terms, we have a resistance because it means change, right? It means, potential growth. Sometimes it can be BS, but a lot of times it just means, something new for growth. And I wanted to make sure that, as I began to research Afrofuturism, that I could see that it definitely related to what I already knew. Because I think in Black culture, it has to be tied to the past and the present. And that's why I'm using that idea of the Sankofa process, past, present, and future, are really the continuum of time. And African cosmology, we are aware of that. We're aware of the continuum of time. That's why when we make our transition, you know, the ancestors are right here. The ancestors are right here. You know, it's that past, present, and future is just constant, a continual cycle. Yeah, so I'm glad I did that for you. Yeah. So let's claim Afrofuture and do something with it. Thank you so much, Michaela, for having me here at Sankofa, and thank you all for coming.
As